The passion, the energy, the power, the spirit of hardcore.
I'm very honored to be on this stage. Please be welcome. And I hope I'll entertain you. I think 1 hour is a lot to listen to someone speaking. So I don't know how long I can keep your attention. And I'll try to be short. And after this, there is a panel. So I'm very happy that some people are joining also to discuss. And yeah, what I'm trying to do is sketch a little bit of our experience with hacktivism, especially in Europe, and define what I would say is the real crypto movement. I'm using this bold term, real, because what we have seen with the crypto scene in the last 10 years, with the hype and everything, is not really what we thought it was for. Like when we created the cryptocurrencies, definitely wasn't for the banks. It was against the banks, against all the institutions that had the monopoly on money and on violence, I mean, connected with the state. So I think there is still a heart beating down there, and yeah, I'm trying to draw an history, starting from my experience, and then I'll highlight 3 challenges ahead that we have as the crypto movement. 3 really hard challenges, in my opinion. So I hope to inspire you. I don't have solutions, and yeah, this is a journey. This is the organization I'm part of. It's around for 20 years now. It's based in Amsterdam, but it's really like network-based. We have a 4 letters TLD, suggesting how old it is. And yeah, it is let's say a hub for many different communities, and we try to help people, new and old initiatives, to survive the challenge of time or the challenge of being born. So if you have ideas, we're very open. These are the topics we work on, and this is the people that inspired us the most. Like we come from this sort of beliefs. The GNU project, the Free Software Foundation. We are software developers, so we don't do services. We don't host services. Lucky for us, maybe that's how we survived. And yeah, developing software, it bears a responsibility, so we always observe these 4 principles. We release everything free and open source, and I don't have to explain you what it means, because here everyone understood how important it is. Of course, there is no security through obscurity. We like our code to be open for others to change it, to redistribute it, to create something wonderful. And yeah, it's 40 years now, the GNU project. So big respect to all those involved. Eben Moglen, who was actually the lawyer that helped Richard Stallman to draft the license. He stopped being around in conferences. The last one was Silver Lining the Cloud. I think he made some speeches about network neutrality. Very, very interesting. He also wrote, I think, some seminal texts about anarchy. Funny to have a lawyer from the Columbia Law School talking about anarchy, so definitely worth reading. And yeah, this is where I really come from. I used to squat houses. I did like 10 years of squatting in Amsterdam, Spain, Switzerland, Italy, South, North. We squat vacant plots. We do a lot of research. The biggest network I was part of, the most organized anarchists I was part of, they were in Amsterdam. We had like the investigative group, which was called the SPOC, Spekulantenonderzoek. So we did research on speculation. We had records from the city. We knew who owned what, and we squatted the buildings with a ready story. After squatting the buildings, we were the first ones calling the police, telling them, look, this is the story of the building, this is our lawyer, talk to us. It was not criminal law handling it, it was a civil case, so we could go to the court and even win it. And we squat a lot of places. There was a time in which we owned a lot of stuff in Amsterdam. And it was also because we were scary. So it was hard to get us out. We knew how to build barricades. So there you go. You have like to pose some barrier to this. Part of my history, I should say also, like this is relevant for privacy. I was doxxed. I was 19 years old when I got to see like the 2 A4 pages from the Interpol about me. So it's I'm part of a generation that probably we were fewer people. I was a potential cyber criminal. So my first job was at a university lab, and the director of this lab got a letter from it was in Siena, so got a letter from the police in Florence saying, hey, do you know that a potential cyber criminal is working for you? By the way, don't let him know. He was good enough to trust in me. He said, like, you're just a kid. And he showed me the files, and he told them like to fuck off. And but I had to think about what I wanted to do in life, because these people had a lot about me. They had my IRC names, my IRC friends, the channels where I hang out, and some of the shells I had around. So yeah, I got to think a lot about what to do with my life in early time. I chose to develop software, and I hooked up with a lot of good people. We did streaming, a lot of streaming, so I was part of indie media networks. We did like stream audio, video when it was possible. At the very beginning of these technologies, you know, implementing Ogg Vorbis into Icecast and doing stuff to use it online. Because I believed in free speech and in, yeah, you build your own media. Of course, we were all part of, in a way or another, of the movements that we know change the connotates of the world, I would say. Because also in this period, what I'm talking about is like between 2000 and 2000 and now, we could say, so the last 20 years, I would say that the hacker movement had an enormous influence on society. I'm not sure we are going to still have all this influence. I'm not sure we want to be so hyped, but it was a period in which the hacker movement actually did some things that really, really impact society at large. So we got a worldwide sensation with crypto. How couldn't we be part of it? I was dragged into it. At the very beginning, it was with Amir. He was visiting our squat in Amsterdam, and he was showing me this Bitcoin thing. It was like 2010. I said, like, what the fuck is this? I never really believed it until I really like understood the code, and yeah, and it was incredible because it just grew amazingly. What you see here on the right is before the Bitcoin, like the more corporate symbol, this was a proposal for the Bitcoin logo. It was an alpaca because someone bought alpaca socks made with wool. Back then, it was one of the first things bought with Bitcoins. And yeah, I still like that logo. Of course, lots of lulz. I immediately supported the idea that a lot of altcoins would be born. I believe that Satoshi broke a taboo in front of all of us, which is a beautiful act from the jester. He left the gate open, and you know, lots of freedom came out of it. Also, lots of spam, but that happens. And I think just to, you know, dive into our ethos, I think these are the people that have been most inspiring in my life. I think they are still inspiring people, not directly as you know, gurus, but what they did, what they wrote, what they believed in, it is very important for us. This is Richard Stallman, the founder of the GNU project, when he visited Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy. I think there is a line in between these projects. I know that intelligence communities are really busy in understanding this line and the actors that acted into it. I believe it's a cultural movement, and it's a cultural movement that that has done a lot of good things for society. And that's also why we are here. You know, we're not just like hiding and trying to be private. We should also be bold, anonymous and bold in saying we really made society better with our acts, and they did. So values like transparency, the ethos behind WikiLeaks and the GNU project. This was the moment in which the link between Bitcoin and WikiLeaks, which I like to drive, also, to link, also like to draw, because to understand really the ecosystem of hacktivism in the past years, this was the time in which Satoshi wrote his very last message on Bitcoin Talk and disappeared. And this was the fluctuations in mining and value, like there's a percentage of price oscillation. This is like just price. This was the WikiLeaks financial blockade in January 2011. Obviously, lots of us, there was also a presentation today that showed a slide like WikiLeaks thanking the blockade from Visa and MasterCard for switching to crypto, because it actually made a lot of gains. This was the time in which we understood that the network was not neutral. So beyond all discussions, technical or economical, that we may do, this was the time in which the hacker ethos realized that the money network, the economical network, the financial networks were not network neutral. So there was no mandate, no judge, there was not a due process, but they shut off the donations to WikiLeaks. So they didn't play by the rules. The rules didn't apply to everyone. So we need our own system, a neutral system that allows value to flow. This was the time in which WikiLeaks was receiving a lot of donations from, because it was the big hit, the first big hit. It was released on media worldwide, which was the helicopter strike in Baghdad on journalists. So then we have Forbes article, first Bitcoin conference organized by Amir, and I remember also his sister was busy, Bitcoin theft, then second Bitcoin conference, bunch of events. The Forbes article on 9th of May was the first big title on mainstream media, which represented Andresen, self-proclaimed maintainer of Bitcoin, that absolutely no one really wanted to be there, but he just represented himself burning some cash on the cover of Forbes. And yeah, I believe that it was not that article that made Bitcoin really big. I believe it was our movement that decided also that that would be the future of value transaction. So it grew exponentially, just like a logic bomb. And we are where we are today. We have lots of projects in different contexts, and they are just like proliferating everywhere. So I finish my introduction with showing you what I've been busy with now, and then I go on into a little bit of a historical perspective before getting to the 3 points, that I think 3 challenges that we have. This is what I got busy with in my doctoral thesis in philosophy, which is something everyone should practice, just like playing music sometimes. And it's about how algorithms are shaping our decisions, our desires, our life, and how much control do we have over algorithms that are developed. So the game of Pokemon shows very well how we can create incentives for people to do stupid things around, just looking for Pokemons. At that time, at the time of the hype of Pokemon Go, there were like kids going around cities, crossing railroads, railways, you know, blocking entrances. Just, we had a lot of people going around the city, to the point that I started thinking like, wow, you can do a cyber attack on a city, on a dense settlement, just by creating an incentive for people to do something stupid and have some tactical targets. This was not planned. This was like completely random, without a sense. But you know, people just follow this game. And so imagine how much control algorithms have on you if you use a social network that has some pictures of your past. how much I could influence of your decision on a certain day or a certain period, but just by showing you a picture of your youth, of your parents, of your friends, of someone that disappeared, someone that was dear to you, or someone that you would like to see. This is all governed by algorithms, and it influences you much more than you want. Cambridge Analytica, big scandal on how, elections were rigged. So I come to a question, which is to me a very important and ethical question, and I will come back to it also at the end of this talk. And I try to pose myself this question every time I think of a new project to do in software. Because most of the companies I see doing stuff today, they do the first. They do develop so that machines understand us. And they don't care if we understand the machines. Which is a radically different approach to develop so that humans understand machines. But that doesn't pay really. It doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it simple. Of course, it's easy to click on a sugar-coated interface that it says, I will solve everything for you, just click here. Of course, it's harder to open a terminal and, start Dark-Irk. But it's worth it because you start understanding the machine and you're not understood by the machine. I'll come back to this concept later because it's part of one challenge we have had. One thing I did, this is the only solution, completely open source, I'm not selling anything, but may inspire someone. One thing I did in the last 5 years was developing this VM, which is a programmable environment in human-like language. So it has a bunch of primitives, cryptographic primitives underneath, and it has sentences that can be executed, just like behavioral-driven development. So it's a dialect of Gherkin cucumber. It's 2 megabytes big. The payload works in 2 megabytes of RAM, compiles to WASM. We do end-to-end encryption with it. I'm not really selling it, don't want people to use it, not advertising. We don't have so much marketing. We have a company that is running, we use it as a building block, main building block to develop. And it works very well. And I tell you why. I want to give you also a hint, which is also an activist hint. At the same time, we need to understand how machines work, but also if we build our tools in a more inclusive way, we can enable interdisciplinarity. And this is very important because there are people that are not developers, they are not programmers, but they know better than us developers how the world goes. Even at work, a domain expert, we work with companies, with clients that do energy grids. And they want to, sign renewable energy produced by the meters. And these people have researched for 10 years the whole market, and the market is different in every single place, so you have percentages that get paid to certain grid providers or not. It depends how you are connected and whatnot. They have an enormous knowledge, let's call it domain knowledge. They are domain experts, and to put it into code, it's a huge overhead. If a communication goes wrong to the developers, it's a huge liability for the developers. So we want them to be able to write code, but a client will tell you, oh, now you're giving me more work to do. We want them to be able to review or be able at least to draw the logics. And this way we distribute liability, but also we distribute work in our team. As a general approach, I'm saying when you think of a technology, if you can enable people with a different discipline to contribute to it, is a very, very good idea. It scales better. So there are two approaches to the same problem. No pain, no gain. Of course, you have to learn technologies. And on the other side, you have to broaden the access to technologies. So over with what I'm doing in my life Today, well, I stopped squatting when it was like 2012. It became a criminal case to squat a house. You risk like 3 years of jail in the Netherlands alone. So yeah, I concentrated on developing software. And I'm now going for the historical perspective before getting to the 3 challenges ahead. This is more of a fun game. You can add or take away things, but this is a bit of an overview of, let's say, as cyberpunks, what we have been through in the past. This is now, wow, almost 50 years, 45, 44. So the cyberpunk movement started to be like the cyberpunk imaginary, the sort of aesthetic in the 80s. It appeared, yeah, I love Kraftwerk, you know, like this sort of stuff, or Einstürzende Neubauten, or this sort of industrial music. And then we got the golden era, you know, at that time it was like more of a underground. The golden era in the 90s, we got computers in our homes. So my first computer was a ZX Spectrum, and you could actually, you know, see code, Commodore, Atari. We had Blade Runner coming out. The New York City had a blackout the whole city for a programming error. This was like shocking. It was the first cyber error, cyber problem. Misguided secret services were starting to get known. Stories about Sun Devil, Gladio. I was born in Italy, so you can imagine Gladio had a big influence on us. The World Wide Web went public. The GNU project was founded in '84. So, big events somehow. Information, intelligence communities started to use information. That's why I mentioned misguided secret services. Leaks started to come out about what they were doing and so on and so forth. We entered the mainstream era right after. So the Time magazine has covers. This. Yeah, the Time magazine, cyberpunk, virtual sex, smart drugs, and synthetic rock and roll. Hell yeah, I like that. A futuristic subculture erupts from the electronic underground. Cool. And I used to play Cyberpunk, the RPG, the role-playing game. It was really good. Like now there's the game on the computer, but it was born from this role-playing game. So this was mainstream, going mainstream. Lone Mover Man, Johnny Mnemonic, like really, like Blade Runner was not alone anymore. Web population exploded. Microsoft Windows became the absolutely dominant OS, which is still today on desktops. I think, yeah, Windows 95 came out in the 90s. Or before that, we had the 3.11. We go on in new millennium era. So Matrix, big switch. I mean, you know, Matrix brings in like this rebellious movement, the revolution, sort of space wars, rebels. George Bush, we had the 9/11, huge hit for the privacy in all over the world. DRM systems were developed and hacked constantly. This goes on still now on the gaming industry and beyond. Google was born. Web 2 got shielded. I think we got the first shields in the ICT, really, like people selling you smoke in the eyes, like marketing people selling you nothing, like Web 2.0. And spam, botnets, more viruses everywhere. RFID started, global surveillance, of course, data mining, and the flash crash. Very important. There is a philosopher, unfortunately died 10 years ago, Kittler, who taught in Berlin, who wrote a lot about this flash crash, because this was the first moment in which something really, really big, impacting reality happened, and we never, ever could explain why. Like, a lot of money was lost in the Nasdaq, in the financial system, due to HFT, high-frequency trading systems, and we never found out why. There are speculations, we can study it, but this was the moment in which, you know, technology that impacts society and in a big way just went bonkers. And yeah, okay, flash crash. We started accepting this fact. And then the crypto era, which we are more familiar, all of us. I think it's over around 2020. The hype is a little bit like redimensioning, which is good for us. What we got? Human rights prevarication, one would expect they got less. No, instead, way more, even like powered by ICT. Pervasive computing, ethical hacking got quite some attention. A boost in cryptography. I mean, elliptic curve cryptography, also the way we use lattice today. I mean, cryptography got a huge boost. This was 2011, was the year in which I stopped as a developer doing DSP and fluffy, artistic stuff, and I dive into cryptography completely. Thanks, Amir, for this tip. And yeah, amazing stuff. Bitcoin, WikiLeaks, and a massive exodus from institutions to networks. I believe even institutions know this. Like, there is, as of trust, we start trusting networks much more than institutions. So there are networked institutions nowadays. Yeah, I like some books. This was an Italian drawer that Professor Bad Trip, like this is Bob Dopp from the Church of Subgenius, for those who know it. And I'm not a pope. One day maybe I will become, but this is church. This is a real church. TADS, temporarily autonomous zones, very important. Pirate utopias. Hakim Bey wrote and published books that are incredible. Tatiana Bazzichelli, second time on this screen, she was also like one of the editor of a book on whistleblowing that was shown today. And very important, I think, Donna Haraway. This is the cover of one of her books. I think that we start entering also in philosophy the acceptance, the era of course, the post-Anthropocene, also the post-human, and which is a different way to the transhumanism that, sort of Kurzweil-led philosophy. What Donna Haraway brings us is the consciousness that we are hybrids. And hybridation is the only path to liberation. And of course, the feminist movement is the best one to tell us this, because, women have been tortured, incarcerated, and persecuted all through history because of purity imposed on them in many different ways. So, yeah, Donna Haraway, I think, is very, very important as a liminal and forward-thinking figure to understand our relationship with technology as she declines it in her books. I go to the challenges now. I draw a little bit of, I try to draw quickly a playing ground, and I propose you like three points on which at least I will be busy in the coming time. One immediately, which is the big identity grab we're facing into all this. Acceleration of systems, tracking, and the lack of threat awareness in general, which is the approach I would take when talking to an institution. And non-deterministic tech as something that we like it or not, we are going to face. So big identity grab is something very concrete. This is a project by the European Commission led at the JRC, at the Joint Research Center, which is drafting the new standard called ADAS 2.0, which is the standard for the next generation of identity wallets that will run digital on your phone. Their objective is to let you upload your ID card and your driving license and more credentials in the future on a mobile phone. Any cybersecurity expert here? What can go wrong? Yeah, they really want to do that because they think it's handy. I mean, it can be handy if you put zero knowledge proof. You can present selective disclosure of credentials, so you will show only certain credentials. That's a good idea. So you enhance privacy, because if I buy a beer here and I look way younger than I am, then I can just show you my photo and my date of birth on a signed credential, and you don't need to know any other information about me. Many other use cases. So this will be, in a glance now, I think many of you are familiar with this sort of systems. This will be the sort of application for these systems. They are very pyramidal. It's reproducing the sort of SSL model. So the issuer has a PID, which is the root of trust. And that is distributed like the root of trust in DNS systems, in domain name servers. And then you hold the wallet, and you have a verifier application. What can go wrong? The best feedback, I believe, was provided by colleagues in Switzerland. Carmela Troncoso, last signer of this document, I think she's a very knowledgeable person to go to. But if any of you have ever been sneaking into who is who in cryptography, this list of authors is like the superheroes of cryptography. We have like Jan Kamenisch, we have Anna Lisianskaya, we have, Jaap Koopman, really great colleague I had luck to work with, Bart Preneel from the KU Leuven. We have some of the top people in cryptography that I would really listen to, and the EC should listen to. And they give this feedback, which is a PDF you can download on GitHub. Fortunately, the process is quite open, in which they demolish quite well the idea of the EUD wallet as it is now. So I'm doing an ipse dixit before going you what is going wrong, because I'm not just like making it up now. There is also a very nice feedback given by the team in Finland that is working on implementation of this wallet. And disclaimer, my company has an implementation of this wallet ready if you want. So I'm talking as someone that has implemented it. I've gone through the specification and I know it pretty well. So we're talking about people that knows how this works if you want to have a EUD compliant thing. What are the main issues of this, and why I think it's a very bad idea to have this? Lack of privacy. Terrible, and the feedback of these cryptographers is very clear. You remember when I told you that you can have zero knowledge proof disclosure, selective disclosure? Well, the crypto inside is not zero knowledge proof, because they can't use anything but very old stuff like RSA and HMAC into chips that are in hardware, because the compliancy is only made on hardware security modules. Here I jump to the third point, faith in hardware. The whole specification puts so much faith in hardware you won't believe it. For them to have a trusted execution environment, which is a certified hardware security module, it means it's secure. Magically, the liability, we bury it into the chip. Now, I have signed some NDAs here, so I cannot tell you which company and what, but there are a lot of people hacking TEs. You can simulate an environment around it. There are big incentives to do it all over the world. Imagine in African countries, there are very smart people, and it's worth it to actually, do something that hacks these systems. There is people like Carsten Knoll, who already 10 years ago was peeling off the chip, and with the microscope reading out the keys, but they don't want to listen to this. They have faith in hardware, so if it's a hardware security module, and I tell you, highlight this part, because it is an hardware security module that needs to be computing this stuff, then we cannot have zero knowledge proof in there. Because there are only a number of algorithms implemented in those chips, and they are like boomer algorithms from 20 years ago. So in other way, cryptography, you understood. I make a whole point there. Revocation. This was my pet issue. I open up a polemic with colleagues at the JRC. Disclaimer, I also work for the European Commission, is my biggest client as a researcher. And we point out that revocation was problematic in every credential system. Usually you develop credential systems without thinking of revocation. Also in a technopolitical way, because Yeah, you can make it private, okay. They are trying to use status lists that are bit status, so there is a certain degree of centralized privacy for what is being work in progress here. But if you put revocation in the hands of a single entity, it means that a single entity, an issuer, can press a button and revoke your driving license and your ID without even finding where you are. Now imagine you are a journalist in a place like Hungary today, for instance. I'm not talking like science fiction here. And yeah, you have a prime minister that really doesn't like you. What could go wrong? You know, you couldn't even take a car and pass the border, you know, So yeah, revocation is an issue, and it needs to be accounted in the threat model. I will get there. Scalability. This was a point very well explored by the Finnish colleagues. This thing doesn't scale, just in numbers. It doesn't compute fast enough, as it is the specification. Usability is quite a disaster because it's a patchwork. The patchwork is there also because the project should have been already finished and have a working reference implementation in 2023. We are entering the fourth quarter 24, so they are rushing to do things. So it's less and less usable, adding things to a UX without studying much on it. The Finnish team made it very clear in the whole specification of the European Identity Architecture Reference Framework, there is no support for legal persons. So only natural persons, which is quite limiting for such a credential system. And last, not least, what I stressed with my colleague at the W3C, Simone Onofri, I'll get also there to explain, is there is no threat model. In the whole architecture reference implementation has been published, there was no threat model. So they went developing an architecture without a threat model. So anytime you talk to them, it's like, yeah, maybe it's a threat. Well, maybe not. There is no ground. The rules of the game are not there. So I don't know where the threat comes. Why? Because these people, when they work, they are not in bad faith, I can assure you. But they have only this thing in mind. We have to protect our system from cyber criminals. And this is what they work against, you know, they are really afraid of cyber criminals. But there are more threats, many more threats. These are threats in Europe. Populist politicians, grey bureaucrats, which in completely good faith, they rush into an implementation which will be not fit for the purpose. Expert consultants, which brings me directly to mega corporations, you know, lobbying firms that see money grabs in there. And ultimately, our overlords, who owns 99.9% of the hardware and OS on all the phones worldwide. Two companies, Apple and Google. That's it. I mean, I have Memo Leste on a Nokia 900, you know, and run Dev one on my machine, but fact is, that's it. So, of course, being hardware the limitation, then there can be only a T and a certified HSM, which is provided by the OS as an API. So you cannot program what is going on cryptographically because the chip is offered to you through a proprietary API that isolates the computation from the OS, and it's provided by them. So, of course, they have access to the data that you are communicating to the chip, which is a huge data grab for them. Because imagine your grandmother is going to be asked to use the ID of this system. So, I mean, at least ideally, so it's a huge data grab. If you're interested in threat modeling, Because we like to be constructive with our criticism, please join this group. It's the TMCG, it's a community group at the W3C. You don't have to pay or subscribe to the W3C. Being a community group is open to everyone, and we are trying to massage the idea that threat modeling is something needed, and that threat modeling should be an interdisciplinary process. So we don't need only developers in there, we need human rights activists, we need people with experience of what can go wrong, and lawyers, we need philosophers, anthropologists, economists, ethnographers, please, artists. Another thing I forgot to mention and put in the slides, also being constructive about this thing, obviously dealing with an institution that I try to save from these mistakes. We also produced a paper, it's called SDBLS. You'll find it on Arxiv, and it's also published by IEEE now, and it's a paper in which we develop a system based on BLS signatures with a threshold revocation. Because we believe that revocation systems should have a threshold, so a multi-signature. So if you want to revoke something, you have a multi-signature of issuers, plus we delegate it to other issuers to have the revocation. So the issuer of the credential doesn't need to be the same of the issuer of the revocation. We develop this and demonstrate it in math, in a zero-knowledge proof system, SDBLS, Selective Disclosure BLS. We call it like this because the main algorithm that they are using right now in the EUDRF is called SDJWT, which is the JWT, the Java Web Token, which is HMAC tuples, basically. It's really sad. I come to the third problem, the third challenge, because I just talked about the first, the identity data grab, and the second, which is letting institutions understand what is the real threat here. I really like Jared's presentation before me because he showed that what people have in mind when they fight frauds, financial frauds for terrorism is like that small, but they see only that. So I get to the third challenge, and this is more philosophical, and I'll leave you with this. I try to sketch where we are living now in. The era that we entered is software-defined reality. So our realities are more and more changed by software. And this has an implication in law, although I'm not a lawyer, I'm a philosopher by training, but it's really the end of the property rights, according to Roman law, which had three principles: usus, fructus, and abusus. In Latin, this meant what is written there, that you had certain rights on your possessions. Now think of cars that you buy, and you have to buy a subscription to warm your seat. So they have the functionality, but you have to enable it. It's controlled from remote. Think of games. There is an initiative in Europe that is getting traction, but games that you buy, and if a server of a company goes down, you cannot play it anymore. Think of all the things that have strings attached and that enable you to interact with reality depending of a state that is decided elsewhere. Not anymore by a person, but by a machine. A machine learning system, maybe. So, I come to my question here. And it's the last question. Probably our challenge now is entering an era in which we are dealing with technology that is non-deterministic, most likely, what I deduct from the hype also in machine learning and the speed of development of it. And this non-determinism is defining our reality. I leave the question open, and I enter from a philosophical standing ground because I don't know all the consequences of this. But you can start imagining them in your own domain, as you are domain experts of different fields. If this happens, then the way we interpret reality is not anymore following a cause-effect. Now, if you are a medic or a lawyer, you can immediately think of, really serious things that start shaking under your feet. Liabilities are already a big problem. Why I say this? Because we are dealing with technologies that, given the same input, will not produce the same output. Obviously, I'm not talking about cryptography. So as a cryptographer, I think I am quite horrified, because I like determinism, and I think this is the way I can understand a machine and dominate its process, put it into a human-centric liability process, and if I lose this sort of thing, then I enter a system in which I cannot anymore pinpoint what went wrong or right. And this something, as I said before, can define our reality. I can make small predictions, but mostly historical projections about what this means. One technology, one branch of science and technology that has this is chemistry and physics. In chemistry, you cannot go back to the ingredients that produced the thing that you have. Once you mix, you cannot go back. In physics, you can always go back. So these are really different scientific branches under this analysis. And of course, in chemistry, we have a lot of proprietary stuff because you can conceal your ingredients. You don't have to open source what you're doing. In physics, also compliancy is built on the demonstration and liability. So if you have like an airplane, it's a different process than doing Coca-Cola or Pepsi. But still, a lot of people are flying and a lot of people are drinking sugar water. So I'm leaving you with these questions in your mind, because that's, I think, what a philosopher should do. And yeah, if you want to get in touch, I'm on Darkkirk and Dynor Contact, and I'm looking forward for the next panel. So Amir coming in. So I think
but we got a few questions first. Two formative books for me as a teenager in the 70s.
I'm sure we read very similar books.
Was The Coming Era of Nanotechnology from Eric Drexler.
Oh, yeah.
And, well, actually a pair, Future Shock and The Third Wave from Alvin Toffler.
Okay.
And those three things make me think about the video that Amin showed earlier today, where the guy was lecturing in the hotel and said, change is inevitable, right? Mm-hmm. It's about how it is that you ride it. And I think that we've postulated here that we all know that we're living in a paradigm shift. And so I want to challenge you where it is that you ended, about keeping things human-centric and, pulling back and holding on to the values that we hold dear from our generation and that we're passing on to this generation. Those books affected me in a way that I thought that I looked at all of my peers and the older people that were around me, and the ones that remained young were the ones that remained active and the ones that remained present and productive in the world were the ones that stepped into exactly the change that was coming. So right now we're here talking about literally the singularity, right? So I would ask you to step forward into that mindset and to say how it is that we can embrace what it is that's coming at us and move ourselves forward with the principles that it is that we hold dear, while maybe finding new principles that we don't understand yet because we're in such a rapid pace of change that we're not adapted to it yet. And yet my daughter's 32, kids 15, they're growing up into this world. Yeah, with that set, they don't even have our set of frameworks to examine how it is and what it is, the change that is happening, because they're growing up in a new normal. So how do we remain young and plastic for these things that are challenging our very sense of reality?
I can't answer in an abstract way, but only in a very specific way, because I don't know. But for instance, of all the things I've said, one thing that I would say we should do is specifically on the digital identity systems, which I do present you because it's a hard topic, and also this will be all linked to, you know, these systems. It's all a linked dynamic.
It's here.
And in them, I would immediately say, okay, embrace the future, understand that there can be secure computation in software, which these old engineers, they are not paid to understand it. There is no incentive for the hardware industry, but with all sorts of crypto systems today, we can have secure computation and provable computation in software. So we don't need to trust all this hardware. And so we embrace an acceleration, we move forward into a progress into technology, and we escape a trap.
So it's a hardware question.
Yeah, of what I have shown, you know, as a concrete intervention, what I will try to do on the consciousness of the people I'm interacting with. And I'm trying to, but it's very difficult to let people understand, you know, like explain them how to make provable computation in software, have a VM that is isolated but lives, you know, on everyone's computer, and you can verify its computation. Not everyone will understand it. But yeah.
Do I have a question for Yara?
What was the name? Excuse me.
Jaromil.
Jaromil. Please show me the last message of Satoshi, the fourth slide.
It was quite a journey into slides, huh?
Thank you, Jaromil. Do we have another question? A lot of knowledge up there on stage, and we have 3 or 4 minutes to get another answer from somebody. Guys, really.
Cool. Here, don't be afraid to pose questions. Yeah.
I really shouldn't be asking because I only saw the last third of your talk. I have to apologize, but
You didn't.
I will see the rest online. But I've seen Jared's talk also, which I also found very good. You mentioned it.
Yeah.
Now you're saying we should, like one way to respond to the singularity coming would be that societies at large understand the value of trustable technologies like cryptography, which at the moment institutions don't really leverage in a way you say they should be, really. I've been following for a while what Audrey Tang, for example, has been doing in Taiwan, which is sort of leading a civic tech movement into government and actually implementing change then at the nation level, but with a civic tech background. I feel in Europe, we have all the competency in the civic society to really do the same. I'm even thinking, why don't European governments have like a huge army of software developers like Facebook that's literally building the digital nation state? And it could all be open source, and it could be actually us building it because we know the tech that's needed to make it actually work trustlessly and stuff. And there is even the monetary resources in crypto at large to fund it in theory. So why are we failing to do this, and what could we be doing from your perspective to be better and solve it?
I don't believe this is a singularity. That's Michael's interpretation. I think history goes in spirals, so not big bangs. But to answer your question, I have one bad experience with a research project which was a flagship project for the European Commission called Decode, led by principal investigator Francesca Bria, in which we had 4 people acqui-hired by Facebook. So we produced a paper, which is the Coconut Zero Knowledge Proof System, which is what NIM is running, actually, developed by Alberto Sonnino and George Danezis. And when this was published, Facebook acqui-hired George, Alberto, and other 2 researchers. Fortunately, they wanted to do Libra with it. They got blocked. I mean, in the commission, it ran quite some interrogation whether that was legal or not, and because, you know, they predated 2 years of research. It was public research.
Okay.
And fortunately, now we have a product from our community to, exploit that technology and not Facebook. But this is half of an answer. They have a lot of more money, and the EC is not putting that much money into research. So ultimately, I don't blame my colleagues for having, done their own private interest and their own family choices in getting paid much more for what they do, because it is worth much more. So I think at the European Commission, they are not capable of understanding how much is worth what some of us do. And not all people do something real, but it's complicated. And this is one answer. But you ask what needs to be done. I think really for valuing people, there should be a way more exchange. So not the usual people, because it's becoming like an academic baronate system, which you have like really people blocking positions. You don't have so many young people, so there is not inclusion. And also in this process of the EUDRF, I think it's evident how development starts being driven by influencers. So there are like 3 people that draw a part of the specification and OpenID, which are very good, of course, very good at what they do. They are geniuses, but they are 3 people, and they're going around making the specification, being on several boards of standardization, going around in road shows, telling everyone that how the EUD is a good thing, because their work is in there. And I don't see many more people contributing. I see the people contributing from national states implementing this thing, telling me a lot of the stuff that I told you behind the scenes, because they cannot say it in public, and saying how problematic is this implementation. So I would say there are different factors there, but we need to be careful that a scientific process is not driven by influencing influencers and roadshows. This thing is not a thing for roadshows yet. Identity Week in Berlin, the party in Berlin is like, I don't know, it's like a Bitcoin conference. I mean, people on the stage, yeah, their identity framework. Oh, you should have a critical, peer-reviewed. So these, I hope I give you some elements.
Jaromil, thank you so much. Stay here,
Yeah,
because we're going to have a panel. Jaromil.